How's it going, everybody? In today's video, we are going to be creating a contact form in Gatsby. We're going to be taking that information and using a GraphQL mutation, send that data to WordPress, and then store that data in a custom post type and advanced custom fields. So this is what it looks like a little bit. You can type in your information here, select your favorite food, little test message, and what it's going to do is it's going to create that mutation. It's going to take that data, send it out to WordPress. You're going to get a nice little success message back here. And then if we refresh our form submissions custom post type, we can click into it. And then we have all of our submission data there. So I'm really excited about this. I learned a lot. And remember that if you are new here, to subscribe to my channel and ring the bell for weekly WordPress development tutorials. All right, let's jump into it. All right, so first things first, let's jump into our plugins and see what we're going to be working with today. So I just have a vanilla WordPress install going right here. I've got 2019 installed and just a few plugins here. So the first plugin that I'm going to be using is Advanced Custom Fields. That's what we're going to be storing our data in. We're doing the classic editor just because it's my personal preference right now. Custom post type UI, that's just so we can easily walk through creation of the custom post type without jumping into any code yet. WP Graphical is an IDE inside of WordPress that we can use to actually test our mutations. It has nothing to do with the actual creation of them. And then WP GraphQL is creating our GraphQL endpoint. That's what's going to allow us to create our custom mutation, and it's going to allow us to do all the things that we need to do with it to get it into our custom post type and advanced custom fields. So all of those are almost all of them are necessary. You don't really need the classic editor or a custom post type UI. Those are just my personal preference. All right, so let's jump over to custom post type UI and actually create our custom post type, which we're going to call form singular. Form submissions plural, and form submissions singular. So now that we've got that, we now have a place where we can actually send our data to. And then let's jump over to our code. Let's start creating that mutation. So here we are in functions.php, and I've got WP GraphQL installed. Once we have WP GraphQL installed and activated, we need to actually create an action that is hooking into the process in GraphQL. So there's this action called GraphQL register types. And inside of this step in the process, we can run a function called register GraphQL mutation. And so what that looks like is something like this. And I forgot my bracket there. And what this does is it takes in three different, I guess you can kind of call them parameters, but it takes an array, a single array, and then it has three things that you need to fill out. You need to fill out input fields, and those are the things that we are going to send to WordPress from Gatsby. So that's going to be like our first name, last name, favorite food, and comment. And then output fields is basically anything that we want to send back to Gatsby once our mutation is complete. So this would be like a success message or error message, that kind of stuff. And then mutate and get payload is, well, what are we going to do with this data that we just got from our input fields and stuff like that. So, and that's a function. And so it's going to take the input that we are sending it from Gatsby. So what we need to do is actually define our input fields. So our input fields are going to look a little something like this. And it's just going to be an array of arrays that are dictating what are the things that we can send and what type of things that they are, and then a small description of each one. So we're going to send over our first name, and that's a string, last name string, food, favorite food is a string, and message is a string. You're seeing a pattern. If we were sending over anything besides strings, obviously we would change these out. But since we're sending all strings, that's what it looks like. So what we need to do next is get our output fields. What does this look like on the way back? So if we take this and replace it, we have a success and data. And those are the kind of fields that are coming back. All we're going to do is send a success that's a Boolean. So did this work? Did this not work? And then data. And that way we can do kind of whatever we want with it. And you'll kind of see once we get into this mutate and get payload area, that data could technically be an error message, or it could be like a success message. So next up, we have our mutate and get payload. This one's a big one. I'm going to kind of bring this over in chunks just to kind of walk you through this one a little bit slower, because this is kind of where some of the magic is happening. So first, we're just wanting to check to see if ACF is installed. Like, we don't want to be able to take some of these, we don't want to take any sort of form submission if we have no place to put it. Next, we're going to be setting up 3 arrays, and these 3 arrays are our sanitized data, any errors that we're getting, and some acceptable fields. Now, what does this mean? So sanitized data, we're taking data from the user. We don't want to just accept any old string that they throw our way. That could be dangerous. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be adding to this array as we go. We're going to be taking the first name, sanitizing it, and then adding it to this array, and so on and so forth with the other ones. Errors is going to be, as we're looping over these, are any of them gone? Are any of them weird? If they are, let's add them to this array. And if there's anything in that array, we should stop. Now this one's going to be a little bit funky, because we're going to recognize these field keys over here. And so this is pretty important, and I will come back to these, but that's something to do with ACF. But pretty much we want to be able to create these keys over here on the left. Those are the things that we actually care about. That way, if they're sending over extra data maliciously, we're not going to even worry about it. So what we want to do is, since those are the fields that we care about coming from the mutation, we are going to loop over each of those acceptable fields, and we're going to grab the field key out of there. So if the input, so that's coming from our function right here, which is just an array of all the things that they sent over, we want to make sure, like, well, if they sent over the first name, sanitize that first name and put it in our sanitized data array. And if they didn't, put it in the errors array and say that it wasn't filled out. And then so once we've looped over that, we should either have a sanitized data array that has all of the good data in it, or we should have something in our errors. And if there's something in our errors, we are going to return with success false, and our data is errors. And so that way on the front end, we could kind of do something with that. So if everything's looking good, what we want to do is we want to use WP insert post. So we want to use the post type of form submission, and we want to just do the post title of first name, last name. We can get a little bit more creative with that, but that's as fancy as I wanted to make it. So the second argument in WP insert post is true, because we care about it being a WP error or not. So the second argument is, if this is something's wrong with this, make it a WP error. And that way we can do something that looks like this. We are doing if is a WP error, return and get the error message of that form. So that way, or of that insert post, that way we can pick it up on the front end and do something there with that. But if everything's looking good, then let's go ahead and take that sanitized data and loop over it and use update field. This is from advanced custom fields. We are going to take the ACF key, which is these guys. So the advanced custom fields documentation says if you're going to be using update field and there's a chance that there's not data in that field already, you should be using the ACF key as the key that you are saving things to. So what does that look like? If we were to do this by yourself, you can go into field groups, submission data, and if you click screen options, most of the times this is going to be unchecked. So checking this and unchecking this will show and hide this key column right here. So you want to make that checked and copy and paste those. Those are the things that you're going to want to be saving your fields against. Not exactly sure why behind the scenes, but that's what the documentation says. So I'm going to do it. So if once we have created our new post, we have updated the meta information. Now all we have to do is return the output fields. So we have success and we are setting that to true. Everything was good. And then to make this a string instead of an array, we are going to JSON encode this. If you send back an array, you're going to get an error in GraphQL. So you have to wrap this in a JSON encode if you are sending back an array. So this should be looking good. We're going to test out this mutation right now. So let's go back to WordPress here, and let's open up our Explorer. And this is in the WP graphical plugin. Then we're going to get this guy over here down at the bottom left. So this is what you should have. You just click on it and you get to something like this. And we're going to do add new mutation. And so we should have, and which we do right here, is create submission. That's what we called it right up here at the very top. That's what that is corresponding to. So we have created our new mutation, and so now we need to just click on it, and it's going to allow us to kind of fill out these fields so we can experiment with it. Client mutation ID is something in Relay, so all we have to do is just give it something like example for now. It's not super important to this. And then we are going to click, we want to send over favorite food, first name, last name, and message. And so our favorite food will be ribs. Our first name will be Alex, last name will be Young. And then message would be, this is a test. And then what we can ask for in return is our data and success. This will actually return the data back to us so we can make sure everything was good. So let's take a look at this by hitting the play button here. And then it gives us this response back. So it gave us our data, all the data that we submitted, and then it gave us success is true. So everything looks like it went well. Let's go back to our form submissions and see if it gave us something, which it did. Let's say right here, we said Alex Young, ribs, and this is a test. So just by doing it through there, we can still create these submissions. But, you know, that's only half the battle. We need to actually create the ability to send this from the front end. We can do this in the back end all day, but we actually need something for our users. So that's, believe it or not, all the things that we have to do on the WordPress side to get this to be in the right spot. So now let's jump over to the Gatsby spot. So here we are in Gatsby. We just have the Gatsby default starter template here. And all I did was just kind of gut out some of the stuff in the middle. So we just have our layout and we just have an H1 tag with the title of our page. So there's going to be a couple things that we have to start out here with. The first thing is that we need to install a couple dependencies, and I'm just going to put these up on screen here real quick. We need to install Apollo Boost, GraphQL tag, and then React Apollo. Now, the reason why we're having to install these versus the things that come with Gatsby is because the ones with Gatsby happen in a different part of the process. So we have to use Apollo and all that kind of stuff to make sure that this happens outside of the normal build process that Gatsby goes through. It's going to make hopefully a little bit more sense as you start to get more familiar with Gatsby, but for this example, yeah, we need to be able to do that. And this is something that's actually totally cool within Gatsby. The reason why I figured this out is because there has been a talk about it. All right, so now that we have those installed, so make sure you do yarn add and then those three guys. We're going to import some of the things we're going to be using up here at the top. So I'm going to end up using state in use state a React hook inside of here just to make sure that things are a little bit cleaner in here. GraphQL tag, that's what we're going to be using for our mutation. And then the actual mutation component from React Apollo. So that way we can actually have access to the mutation that we set up here. So this is what our mutation actually looks like. This is a GraphQL mutation, and it might be a little bit hard to read, but essentially we are starting with this GraphQL tag, and we are defining a mutation called create submission mutation. And we're accepting a handful of things in here. We're accepting the client mutation ID, the first name, the last name, which kind of wraps around down here, favorite food, and then message. And so we're just defining what those are. And that way, if there's, they submit a number for our favorite food, it's going to die on this end. And then next, so once we create that mutation, then what are we going to actually send across? We're going to have an object that has this same data structure in there. And then what we're going to be asking for back is success or data, and that's the stuff that we can pick up on this end. So now we can take our mutation and throw it into our actual page. It'll look something like this. So we use this mutation component that we got from a React Apollo, and then we pass it in a mutation that we just created called contact mutation. And then that's going to give us access to that mutation here inside of it. So that looks something like this. We have our create submission, and then it has loading, error, and data. And then we can actually create our form inside of here. So what our form is going to look like is a little something like this. And so we just have a regular form. We have an onSubmit handler, and we are going to be taking in the event, and we're going to be preventing the default so it doesn't reload the page. Again, we have that client mutation ID, first name, last name, and favorite food and message. And all of those are inside of this create submission function. So this is something that we are getting passed from the mutation component. And we have these things that we now need to set up. These items right here are the ones that actually need to be set up with React hooks. So first name value will be set by a function that we're going to be calling set first name value, and so forth for the other items as well. And where that's going to come in is we're actually going to have these form fields do that for us on change. So what we're going to have inside of this form is we are going to have, let's go up to the top, is a label and then an input field. And the input field is going to have an onChange event, and we're going to bring in set first name value, and that's going to take in the event target value. And so when we start typing into this, it's going to trigger set first name value. Set first name value is going to set the state for first name value, which is going to go into our mutation. So that's kind of how all that works. The other thing that we need to do is we need to have a place for like our errors and successes. And so outside of this form, we are going to have a div that's styled with just a little bit of padding. And if it's loading, it'll say so. If there's an error, it'll output that. And then if there's some data that comes back, we're just going to say, yeah, boy, because we don't want to get too detailed into all of this. I just want to show the basic concept here. But the one downside of this is now we have to create a React fragment because we now have, this is going to return two things instead of one. So we have to do react.create fragment here, and then all the way down at the bottom again, we're going to do end React fragment. So that should take care of that. So let's just look at the front end real quick and make sure that things are looking okay. Could not find client. All right, so now we're at the part right now where we're looking kind of good. We just need to do a couple things inside of Gatsby to get this Apollo client thing working. So the main guy that we got to do is we have to go into Gatsby browser. So if we open up our file tree and we go to Gatsby browser, we can delete all these comments inside of here. And what we need to do is we need to import React and Apollo provider. So we need to wrap our entire application with this provider. And so the way that you can do that in Gatsby without having to do it manually is you do something like this. So this is something very specific to Gatsby. So you have this wrap root element, and that's going to get in the element, which is our site. And then our Apollo provider is going to take in a client and wrap our whole site in that. We haven't set up the client yet though. So what we have to do is import a file that we will create momentarily. So in source context, Apollo context, we're going to import client. So let's create that really quick. So source, we're going to create a new folder, and that's going to be called context. And inside of context, we're going to do a new file called Apollo context.js. And inside of here, it's actually dang simple. We just are importing the Apollo client, and we're saying, well, what is our client URI? So in this case, it's wp-graphql.local/GraphQL. /GraphQL is what wp-GraphQL is giving us. And then wp-GraphQL.local is just where my WordPress is sitting. So with that combined, we should have a better error message than we just had. And yeah, so now we get this form and we should be good to go. Let's give it a try. So let's fill this up. Let's just do James Bond, and his favorite food is beef jerky, obviously. And then this is my secret message, right? So we hit send it, says, yeah, boy. And let's take a look at our form submissions here. Now we have James Bond. We can go in here. His favorite food is beef jerky, and says that this is my secret message. So we were able to take WP GraphQL. We extended it to create a create submission mutation. And then we went to Gatsby. And then we created that mutation, gathered some form fields, sent that back to WordPress through GraphQL, and then shoved that data right here into a new post and into advanced custom fields. So I definitely learned a lot along the way with this. I hope you did too. If you did, give the video a thumbs up, leave me a comment, let me know what you learned, and anything else you'd like me to cover in the future. Thanks, guys. I appreciate you watching, and I will see you in the next one.